So I recently got an opportunity to try out the Sony FX9, and wow, what a machine, what a piece of equipment. I'm so used to using the Sony FX3 that I thought, when they say the FX3 is a cinema camera, it was used to make the creator, it is all this, it has all these bells and whistles. I thought that I had arrived. I thought that when you start transitioning, it's not really going to be that much of a difference, but it's day and night. When I first got my hands on the FX9, it was big. It's way, way bigger than the FX3. It has more buttons. It looks intimidating. When you're holding it, it's like, whoa, what have I gotten myself into? I've only seen the FX6. I've never really used it, and they look similar in terms of the design of the body. But as soon as you start the camera, the menu system is totally different from the FX3. If you've used the alpha cameras, they have a similar menu system to the Sony FX3. And one of the major differences that you see when you go into the camera is on the FX9, you only have two modes in terms of codecs that you can use. There's the XAVC Intra and then the other one, which is HD, I think. So I think there's an SD and an HD, and those are your only two options that you can use to film. And I was just like, this is high level. Like this is totally different. And I think the FX9 you can also film as cinetone, but I didn't get to experiment with that because I'm somebody who's now just used to filming in S-Log. And speaking about S-Log, oh my days, don't you go trying to use S-Cinetone, and because the exposing of S-Cinetone is totally different. And I'll make another video just explaining how I butchered a project in terms of the highlights, and just terrible because I'm so used to filming in S-Log and using Cine AI, and the moment you change those settings, it's like, whoa, what's happening? So speaking about the FX9, some of the features that were very useful for me on the project that I was working on was the internal ND. A lot of times you hear YouTubers complain about the FX3 not having internal ND and thinking like, man, what's so special about internal ND? I can really tell you it makes a difference, especially if you're filming outside and you have shots where you have to walk inside and outside, and if you put it and you trust the auto ND system on the FX9, like it just keeps your exposure rates perfect, when you're on auto. But if the auto is doing too much, you can take it off and just use the variable ND. And one thing that I like, because I don't know if it's because the ND is inside the camera or how these things work, you don't get vignetting from the ND that's within the camera itself. And I just thought that was a very good touch. That's something that I think for me, when I'm upgrading from the FX3, I'll be looking into different cameras for is, do they have internal ND? Because it's very useful, and it's another less thing to think about in terms of on the camera body. Because sometimes, with matte boxes, so if you have a screw-on filter and you put a matte box that's also screw-on, you can't really move the, because it attaches to the ring, right? So if you have a matte box on a ring with the variable ND, you can't really do much. Then you start needing those more expensive ND filters that go into the matte box. So I think with a camera with an internal ND, that's taken away. One thing that I didn't like about the FX9, which the FX3 have, is IBIS. That is internal, I think it's called internal body image stabilization. And it's a disadvantage because with the FX3 you can do a lot of handheld stuff, you can do a lot of things, if you just steady your body, and it takes away all those jitters from you, because sometimes your hands are not just steady. It takes away those things, whereas in the FX9 that doesn't exist. So you really have to be very careful if you're doing anything handheld. And on this shoot I was, but I had a easy rig, which was helpful. But I just think that if I had IBIS in that camera, it'll be something ridiculous, which led me to learning that apparently they've stopped production of the FX9s. I guess they're bringing in a new camera. But a camera that bridges between the FX9 and the Venus was the Sony Burano, and the Burano has IBIS. I was like, that for me makes it makes it, a very good camera. Unfortunately, the price doesn't, because 32,000 is a lot of money. Going back to the FX9, I think once you're used to using Sony cameras, their usage is basically the same. Like at first I was intimidated just looking at the camera, but when you start to film and when you start to set up the camera, you soon realize everything is essentially the same. Like the dual native ISO, how you set up your shutter speed or shutter angle, how you do everything is just the same. You're shooting in S-Log, you're shooting in this. You essentially expose S-Log 3 on an A7 IV, on an FX3, on an FX9, essentially the same way. I don't know if they use the same sensor, but other than that, for me, I didn't really struggle with that. And then also another thing that I think was a challenge for me with the FX9 was when it came to time to place the whatchamacallit, V-mount batteries to power it, because we were trying to power a follow focus. You had to put this external thing because they didn't have a way to mount a V-mount plate to it. So you had to put this, I don't even know what it's called, but when I was doing research on the FX9, this is a way of, if you want to shoot raw on the FX9, there's this extension thing that you put, which just makes the camera more heavier and makes it more bigger, which is very unnecessary in my opinion. Like, I didn't need to shoot raw. I'm cool with just shooting an S-Log. But because we needed to power the follow focus, we ended up having to put this thing, and it just made the camera more heavier and made it hard to balance on a tripod, made it hard to balance on the Easy Rig. But ultimately everything worked out pretty well. So I was working with the FX9 and SP3s, which when you look at it, it made no sense because the SP3 is like a tiny lens and you have this huge ass camera body. The camera did well. It like I said, when you press record, it really tells everybody you're recording because it has tiny lights everywhere. And that's a good thing when you're on set. If you're rolling, even the actors and be like, yo, man, I don't see the red light, what's happening? But other than that, there was nothing much to it. In terms of image quality, the image is chef's kiss, man. Like there's levels to this, The FX3, I think, punches above its weight. Once I use that FX9, I was like, yo, there's a major difference in just the image quality. But I think the FX3 holds its own weight in terms of that, so it's not a major disadvantage. Like for me, coming back to the FX3, it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm gonna miss the FX9, But I think it is a very great camera, and something that if I could afford it, I'll get it. I mean, it's 14,000 Canadian now, so I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to spend 14,000 on a camera body. I may get the FX6, but it's not. I don't feel like it's much of an upgrade. Another benefit that it came with, I think it doesn't really take SD cards. It comes with this weird cards that it came with from the rental house. So that allows you to just film in, like I said, XAVC, the intro, which is good, because on the FX3, I recently learned this, is unless you have the V90 SD cards or the CF Express A, you're not really getting the most out of your camera. So to get this on the FX9, where you're essentially forced to get the best out of the camera, it's not necessarily built to give you leeway like what the FX3 does, which is a good thing, because I think the FX3, if you're just doing this type of videos, those codecs that it has allow you, and they give you that leeway to be able to do things like this. On top of that, the camera comes with the NPF batteries, which suck. Those ones that take 24 hours to charge and run out pretty quick. But we were not relying on those because we were on the V mounts. The other thing is the image sizes, like the final project sizes. They were not really big. I think for 48-hour shoot, it was a 48-hour shoot, 30 pages. We used about 1 terabyte of data. And comparing that to something like an Arri Alexa or even a Blackmagic, that is nothing. Like on those cameras, you'll be looking at 4 terabytes of data. For me, is this a camera that, I'd recommend? I think so. I think I would recommend it just because of the image quality that I saw on it. It was way more cleaner compared to my FX3 image that I normally get on normal shoots. So I'd say that from a image quality wise, yes, I would recommend the camera. Yeah, I'd recommend it in terms of weight. It doesn't really weigh much. Even with that brick thing that we ended up adding, it doesn't weigh much. So you can literally just, and I think the natural way of using it is putting it on your shoulder or even doing handheld. It's something that you can also do. The camera just feels, it feels correct, man. Like there wasn't much weight. One thing I would say is when I had it on the easy rig, like the easy rig, man, that thing is a liar. Like, they say, oh, it takes away the weight from your hands. Yeah, it does that and puts the weight in your hips. So if you're standing for quite some time, you end up feeling the pain in your hips and in your lower limbs. Thank God I do leg days. But yeah, at a certain point you're like, yo, this is getting heavy. Um, in terms of image quality, I think it's one of the best image qualities that I've seen out there. And what I like about, once you're used to using a Sony camera, you almost know what Sony image looks like. And in terms of your grading, that's down to preference. Someone pointed out that my images tend to look, they have a little blue in them. And this is something that I just like doing, is every time I am on the color grade, I tend to push because I feel like almost all the image I get out of my Sony cameras, it goes yellow for some reason. So I have to fight it and go the opposite, which is blue. And I like blue. So for me, that works. When I tried using a black magic, it was pain because I found it introduced a lot of magenta in the image, and magenta is just terrible for skin tones. So then you really need a colorist who's dedicated their life to learning and understanding how to manipulate colors. Whereas my life is not necessarily about how to manipulate colors, it's about lighting and composition and other things that determine the final image we get. So I'm not really much of a colorist. I'm more centered around the image that we're getting. So yeah, if you have an opportunity to use an FX9, I would recommend do it. Let me know what you think in the comment section. um I don't know which other cameras are coming out. There's a lot of great cameras that are coming out. One thing that I've learned is a camera is basically just a computer. It's a tool, man. Like, and each camera has its benefits. Like with this one, the image quality I feel is better than what I get out of an FX3. But then that is also just looking at the size of the camera, so you can imagine the amount of processing that's going on in an FX9 compared to what's going on in an FX3. I don't really know how much about the engine that's within both cameras, what it looks like and what it's doing, but I can assume just by the size of the FX9 that it's doing pretty much a lot of work, which is the same thing when you look at a Venice, when you look at a Ari, like those, the technology that's within the camera is what I think makes them super expensive, and just what they are working with. So you can understand that the FX3 is doing a lot at that, for Sony to be able to produce that. And I know that I don't know much about what goes in these cameras, but that's what I can assume. It's a computer and an image sensor, and they're working together to give you the final product that we get to see. So yeah, if you are looking into the FX9, I do recommend it. But a camera I really look forward to using, and I hope to soon, is the Sony Burano, because I think that thing just has a lot of use cases that I can imagine. And then from there, we go to the Venice. With that said, I hope you found some value in this. Hit the subscribe button. See you in the next one.